was established as America's first national park in 1872. And in fact, there is an argument that it's the world's first national park. So this is a special place that you are standing. And it's these thermal features that set Yellowstone aside as the park. So the United States government had heard these stories about a place in the west where smoke comes out of the ground and water shoots up 100 feet in the air. And they investigated to see if in fact those stories were true. Because those stories came from mountain men, people who were trappers, people who were frontiersmen, people who told tall tales. Can you depend on the word of a frontiersman? No, you cannot, because their bread and butter is telling very difficult to believe stories. Stories about petrified birds that are sitting in petrified trees and they're singing petrified songs. You can't depend on those. So expeditions were sent out in the early 1870s, and in 1872 there was such widespread support for setting this rectangle of land apart that the United States government said, we're going to close this land to settlement, we're going to make it a place for people to enjoy. And you are some of the people that are enjoying that. Okay. And so we are going to take a look at some of those things. We're going to start in this direction, and I'll encourage you to engage your senses, your 5 senses that you've got, and to not just look. You know, we depend a lot on our sight, but also what you hear, what you smell, what you feel with your hands. Now, our end of our hand is not a thermometer, so don't put that into the thermal feature to figure out. I do have a remote thermometer that we'll take and measure temperatures as we go along. So, let's make our way to the Dragon's Mouth. This is my second season here. And,
Deep water. That's why it's too rain too long, right?
But we won't stick around too long. Now I'll point out along the way here, these are some mud pots. You'll see another mud pot. It's one of the 4 thermal features that we have here in Yellowstone. We have the mud pots, we have geysers, that's like Old Faithful. There's also hot springs, which we're going to see up here. And the last one are called fumaroles. So this one is bubbling right now, so we would call it a mud pot. If the water table were a little bit lower, then you would just see steam coming out. You wouldn't hear it bubbling, and we would call it a fumarole.
So if there are no bubbles, only the fumes coming out, then it will be called?
So the fumes that are coming out, there's heat that's under the ground that heats things up. So that, well, let's just see if I can measure what that temperature is there. I don't really see. I'm looking for the highest
spot,
temperature.
Yeah.
So I saw an 86 there.
Okay.
87 maybe is about as high as that one is. So about 87 Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit. Okay.
So what's that in Celsius? It's the sound of gas that's escaping out of this spring that's here. So the water forms a seal as it goes up, blows it out. That's why you're seeing that those waves. Let's see if we can figure out what this temperature is down here. I'm getting about 134 Fahrenheit. 140, 150, 154.
What's boiling water? It's about 212?
212 and atmospheric pressure. Here,
Pressure's lower.
The pressure's lower, so it's about 200 Fahrenheit here. So that bubbling that's happening is as a result of the escaping gas.
Not as a result
Not
of
so much of the temperature. So this Dragon's Mouth Spring is a feature that has changed over many years. Back in the 1970s, this feature was so violent that it was spewing mud up where we're standing right now. So
Really? Wow.
This boardwalk didn't exist then.
Okay.
After the 1990s, there were a series of earthquakes that occurred, and that caused the plumbing underground to change. So think about this Yellowstone area as an old house. And when you take the plumbing in an old house and you shake it, you're going to end up with leaks. And those leaks now cause these thermal features to change over time. Yellowstone is a special place. In the world, there are some 1,000 geysers. More than 500 of them are in Yellowstone National Park. Most of them are over on the west side of the park. So Old Faithful is the most famous of those geysers, but there are many other geysers along there. Have any of you all visited Old Faithful? So if you have not, then I encourage you to go to that area. That Upper Geyser Basin has a walk that is probably about 3 miles, so not quite 5 kilometers, that you can walk around and see many of the geysers. And the Park Service at the Visitor Center at Old Faithful will predict the times of the eruption of some of those. And I would encourage you to visit the Visitor Center there at Old Faithful before you go out to see the geysers, so that you can figure out where you want to be at what time. If you have not seen an eruption of a geyser, that's a really amazing thing to see. We have changed this now at the Mud Volcano. And I want to suggest to you that this is another example of change. Here on this panel, there's a depiction, an artist's rendition of what this looked like back in the late 1860s, early 1870s. At that time, there were some expeditions that the U.S. government sent out to investigate these stories, the validity of these stories that the mountain men were telling. And they found that, in fact, there is this land where smoke comes out of the ground and water spurts up in the air. And those expeditions had with them some photographers and artists that drew and captured images of what this place looked like. And those images were so compelling, and the testimony of those who had been on those expeditions was so convincing that there was this groundswell of support to reserve this land that we now call Yellowstone as a national park. In 1872, when that official expedition came along, they found that the picture that you see here that's got a conical shape to it didn't look that way anymore. It looked more like what we see here. And the geologists tell us that there was this blast that occurred that blew the cone apart. And now what we see is this turning area. This is a mud pot. We'll measure the temperature of this one as well. We'll measure it here. It looks like about 148 Fahrenheit is where we are. So again, trying to figure out what that is in Celsius, there's probably about 60 Celsius. So it's pretty hot. You wouldn't want to take a bath in that. That would scald you. This is another example of change in Yellowstone Park. We're coming to the end of the formal program. This area has this lower loop that we're on, but there's also an upper loop that you can see the orange on.
No, I don't want
It goes from down to mine. This is the ski plane.
Dad, I got a good example. Throw one of your roosters in that, you know, that looks it. See how much it's
Park is just a howling wilderness of 3,000 square miles, full of all imaginable freaks of a fiery nature. Now I know what it is to sit enthroned amid the clouds of sunset. Rudyard Kipling, 1907.
Welcome to Yellowstone. The human stories of Yellowstone reach back 11,000 years and include your journey today. What drew you to Yellowstone?
In 1871, rumors of volcanic activity prompted scientists to explore and document the Yellowstone area. Artist Thomas Moran and photographer William Henry Jackson accompanied the expedition. And through their paintings and photographs, Yellowstone captured the hearts and imaginations of the American people. A year later, Yellowstone became the world's first national park. Land set aside as a place for all to experience nature's wildness. Discover your Yellowstone. From dazzling palettes of color created by microscopic communities of heat-loving organisms called thermophiles, to the joy of new life, to water crashing down into the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone River, to so much more. Are you ready to experience your Yellowstone?
In hydrothermal features, this is one of the best spots in the world to view them.
Gaze into the park's numerous hot springs, pools where water heated underground flows freely to the surface. Watch geysers, hot springs with an underground constriction, erupt hot water above the surface. More than 500 geysers, over half the world's total, are found within the park, most of them near Old Faithful. Listen to fumaroles, the hottest hydrothermal features, hiss and growl as heat flashes the limited water underground into steam. Look for bubbling mud pots, acidic hot springs that dissolve the surrounding rock. Tour these hydrothermal wonders along the park's many boardwalks.
Yellowstone is a volcanically active area. Much of the park is actually situated inside of the Yellowstone caldera. The caldera was formed about 640,000 years ago during a massive volcanic eruption. Today that caldera is about 30 by 45 miles wide.
All this volcanic and hydrothermal activity is due to Yellowstone sitting atop a geologic hotspot, a place where molten rock, known as magma, reaches closer to the surface than normal. As you explore Yellowstone, think about the tremendous heat beneath your feet. Stay on boardwalks and marked trails in all hydrothermal areas.
To experience Yellowstone is to experience the heart of one of the largest and most intact temperate ecosystems on Earth, known as the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem.
The ecosystem contains vast lodgepole and Douglas fir forests, sagebrush steppe and alpine tundra, wetlands, rivers, and lakes. Within this ecosystem lives a diversity of native wildlife. Food availability determines where wildlife is found in the park. As the snow disappears in the spring, Yellowstone bursts to life. Ungulates such as elk, bison, and pronghorn roam across the ecosystem within and outside park boundaries based on the growing season of the plants they eat and the severity of winter. As summer returns, these animals migrate to areas like the fertile valleys of Yellowstone. Predators like wolves, bald eagles, and river otters are more elusive, moving around based on where their prey are found. Summer is a time for colorful blooms of wildflowers to cover the mountainsides, young animals to grow strong before their first winter, and male bison to compete for mates. To survive, Yellowstone's animals must move freely in their environment. Keep your distance. If any wildlife approach you, immediately move away to keep your distance. Prevent them from eating any human food. Help keep Yellowstone's animals wild. The arrival of fall brings the very active and loud elk mating season. It's also a time of preparing for winter. Bears focus on gaining weight.
Bears hibernate for 5 months out of the year here, and so the months that they're active, they're intensely feeding, trying to gain enough weight for hibernation.
Foraging bears may not notice you. It is especially important to know and practice bear safety. Be alert and keep your distance. When hiking, make noise. Travel in groups of 3 or more. Carry bear spray and know how to use it. As winter returns to Yellowstone, new opportunities abound for visitors. And it can be a great time to spot wildlife. Taking advantage of the lack of competition for food, trumpeter swans migrate to Yellowstone during the winter. Elk, mule deer, and bison migrate to lower elevations, or they can be found around geyser basins, where the heat keeps winter snows at bay. Millions of people also migrate through the park each year. Whether you are here for the first time, or are here time and again, there is a lot to enjoy. With the greater Yellowstone ecosystem extending over many millions of acres, encompassing state, federal, tribal, and private lands, it is a living laboratory filled with knowledge waiting to be discovered. Find out how the changing climate affects the ecosystem, or how native populations are impacted by invasive species. Learn how fire plays a natural role in the ecosystem, and how research on microbes living in extreme conditions has led to medical and scientific discoveries. Explore Yellowstone's visitor centers, join in a ranger program, and most of all, get out into the park to witness the wonders firsthand. Take time to get to know Yellowstone.
People have traveled from around the world to experience Yellowstone. They have enriched the history and chosen to preserve and protect this world-renowned treasure.
Some of my most memorable experiences in geyser basins have been at sunrise or sunset. So it's very quiet, and the light will sometimes strike a geyser pool just right, making it a beautiful color.
just seeing the reaction of visitors when they see a grizzly bear for the first time, or a majestic bull elk. And it's just a remarkable thing to watch.
I got to see Old Faithful, the Grand Geyser, and some other ones. My favorite was Old Faithful.
There are no other places like this on the face of the earth.
There are so many stories to learn from Yellowstone. It's your park, and so we want you to enjoy it while you're here.
Welcome to Yellowstone.
Visiting Yellowstone is said to be life-changing. A place to be preserved for and enjoyed by all. Once you experience Yellowstone, where will it leave you?